This week we're wrapping up our discussion of the ontological argument for the existence of God by looking at the most common objection to Alvin Plantinga's version of it. By way of reminder, Plantinga's argument says this. Premise 1. It is possible that a maximally great being exists. Premise 2. If it is possible that a maximally great being exists, then a maximally great being exists in some possible world. Premise 3. If a maximally great being exists in some possible world, then it exists in every possible world. Conclusion. If a maximally great being exists in every possible world, then it exists in the actual world. The typical skeptical response to Plantinga involves an attempt at what's called reductio ad absurdum. In other words, you carry the argument through to its logical conclusion and show that it leads to absurd results. Now, usually the way this is done is through a parody argument that uses different terms. Apologist Douglas Groothuis gives an example using an island. Premise 1. It is possible that a greatest possible island exists. Premise 2. If it is possible that a greatest possible island exists, then it exists in some possible world. Premise 3. If a greatest possible island exists in some possible world, then it exists in every possible world. Premise 4. If a greatest possible island exists in every possible world, then it exists in the real world. Premise 5. But it is absurd that a greatest possible island exists in this world, since every extant island is less than perfect. Conclusion. Therefore, this refutes the ontological argument, since it substitutes similar terms and uses the identical argument form by reductio ad absurdum. Different skeptics may insert different things for the island, but the point remains the same. So does this objection work? No, it doesn't. Look, most of the time, it doesn't make a difference what our terms are. We can swap them out freely, follow the same logical format, and see if the argument holds up. But we need to be careful, because sometimes when we swap out the terms, we change the fundamental meaning of the argument, and that's what the skeptic has done here. As Groothuis points out, when we say that God is maximally great, we mean that he has the highest amount of a particular attribute that it's conceivable to have. God possesses the upper limit of greatness. But the whole idea of a maximally great island is pure nonsense. I mean, we could always add more sand, palm trees, coconuts, etc. There's no upper limit for an island to achieve, so there can be no maximally great island. Also, an island, by definition, is not necessary. Remember 2 weeks ago when we were talking about three possibilities? A thing's existence can be impossible, contingent, or necessary. As we've already talked about, the entire notion of a maximally great being is one that is necessary. But an island, by definition, is not necessary. I mean, we can easily conceive of a possible world in which no islands exist, right? So by substituting island for maximally great being, the skeptic has fundamentally changed the argument, so that he's essentially now arguing for an unnecessary, necessary entity, the island. That's just plain nonsense. I mean, something cannot both be necessary and not necessary. That's a violation of the law of non-contradiction. So the skeptic's attempt at creating a parallel version of the argument ends up not being parallel at all. That's all I'm going to say on the ontological argument. Next week we're going to move on to another argument that's gotten more than its fair share of disrespect. Pascal's wager. See you then. God bless.